From the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Today is the 26th of June, 2016. This is David Cline from the History Department at Virginia Tech, and also working with the Southern Oral History Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We are working on the Civil Rights History Project today of the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Behind the camera, we have Guha Shankar from the Library of Congress and John Bishop of Media Generation and UCLA. And we are so honored to be at the home of Michael McCarty today in Los Angeles. And if you could introduce yourself for the tape, we'd appreciate it.
Michael D. McCarty, storyteller, have mouth, we'll run it.
And Michael, where and when were you born?
Chicago, Illinois, September 7th, 1950.
Okay, fantastic. So let's start just with your childhood and
Sure.
your family, and tell us a little bit about your people and where you came up.
I grew up on the west side of Chicago. I was born on the south side. We moved to the west side when I was about 3 years old. And the greatest influence in my life, I like to say, is my mom. I am a readaholic because of my mom. And I can remember my mom reading me and telling me stories from the time I was about 2 years old. And we always had books. And my mother used to say, if you can read, you can do anything. And the other thing, interestingly enough, that she instilled in me is the idea that if you saw something wrong, you had an obligation to do something about it or to let somebody know who could. And that would come back to give her a little nip later on in life because I took it to heart. So grew up, it was me, my mom and dad. I have 2 older brothers and an older sister. And when I say older, 14, 20, 25 years between me and my siblings. I was a surprise. My mother used to say she thought she had gas. So grew up and I went to Catholic schools. My mother was from Barbados. And so I went to St. Franbar Elementary School, St. Ignatius College Prep, on the all on the west side of Chicago. I was going to be a physicist. I loved math and science, and that was my dream, was to be a physicist and to be an astronaut. I became a revolutionary. Just a little bit of a detour, but all behind that idea of my mom. You see something wrong, you should do something about it. And we got the newspapers. We got, at one point, we got the Sun-Times, the Tribune, the Daily News, and the Chicago Defender. So we were well read. And so I had an awareness of, as the civil rights movement grew and developed, I had an awareness of it from reading the paper. Watching, of course, seeing things on the news, seeing all these activities going on. But then there's the things that happen to you. I grew up on the west side of Chicago, near an area of Chicago called Cicero. Cicero was one of those sundown areas. If you were black, don't have your butt in Cicero after sundown. You would be hurt, you could be killed.
And these are things that you grew up knowing.
Yeah. And, or you sort of knew those things. And at the same time, as a kid, I remember me and a buddy, we rode our bicycles into Cicero. Inadvertently, we needed some air in our tires or something like that and stopped at a gas station to put air in the tire. Next thing you know, there's water. Somebody's hosing us and get us out of the area. But the incident that was the real kicker for me, I was in the Boy Scouts. And as Boy Scouts, you're trying to get merit badges. So one day, me and 3 of my friends, we wanted to get our cycling merit badges. So we left our area around 13th and Avers. 13th and Pulaski was the major street. And we were going to ride out past Crestwood, Illinois. And we figured that would give us the necessary mileage to get our cycling merit badges. So we're riding, and on our way back, we stopped at this water fountain across the street from a little league game that was going on. So one by one, we stop at the water fountain. I'm the last one. And I'm there trying to guzzle all the water in the earth. And all of a sudden, I become aware of my friends, because as each one drinks, they would ride on. All of a sudden, I look up and they're waving at me and pointing and yelling. And I look, the Little League game had stopped. And the stands and the field had emptied. And this is an all-white scenario, and they're all running. And I still have this image of this woman, white woman, couldn't have been much more than 5 feet tall, running and calling me everything but a child of God with, I don't know, a brick or a ball or a bat or something in her hand. I rode real fast, caught up with my friends, passed them. Now, the thing that I find interesting, I don't think I ever told my parents about that. All right? Because that was the way things were. And we got away, we went on about our business, and life went on. And then later, I was in high school, maybe sophomore year, and me and a buddy went to a party on the south side of Chicago, over in the hood. We walked into this project, a high-rise project, and we walked into this building past these guys, and we turned the corner where we thought the elevator was, dead end. Turn around, there's these guys, this gang, and they proceeded to beat the snot out of us for however long. They literally beat us until they got tired. Now, at one point, the guys who were kicked my butt out onto the street. I guess they wanted some fresh air. And at one point, the guy is going to shoot me. Because everybody else is, like I said, they're literally tired. I'm laying face down on the ground. He pulls me up by the neck, puts a gun to my head, and pulls the trigger. And this girl, to my mind, an angel, snatches, "No, Johnny, don't do it," snatches his hand. And so he pistol whips me. And at that point in time, pistol whipping, bullet in the head, pistol whipping is cool. So he tells me to run. And I can't run. I can't even stand up. But I crawl real fast. Or not even fast, just crawl away. My friend is still in the building. I don't know what's going on with my friend. I see a police car stopped at a light. And I stagger over to the car. Now, at this point, I'm bleeding. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to swell up. And I stagger over to the car and frantically tell him what's happened. And he looks at me and says, "So?" White cop. So I get into the police car because this is what's supposed to happen. He's supposed to help me. And I tell him where to go. And he goes, pulls up in front of the building, and tells me to get out of the car and go into the building and find my friend. Meanwhile, the remnants of the gang are sitting outside the building. They see me. They get up, and they're coming to the police car to extract me and finish what they started. I said, "Look, arrest me, take me away from here." So he took me to the local police station, which was only a block or two away, as I recall. So I'm thinking this is an aberration. So I go into the police station, and I never even get a chance to say anything. Now I'm really swelling up. And the cops, all white, start laughing when I walk in. Now, my friend had managed to get in somebody's apartment, and he called his mom, and we met up at the police station and went to the hospital, and he got stitches and stuff like that. But that was my personal wake-up call. Mm-hmm. And then I became involved in the youth wing of the NAACP. Me and my buddy Tyler, we started a black student organization at St. Ignatius, because St. Ignatius, like a very prestigious college prep, 95% white, on Roosevelt Road, in the black community, right across from some projects, but there was no dynamic, there was no interaction.
And was your street and neighborhood largely African American? Or
All black.
All black, okay.
All black by the end of the time.
So, and then you'd go to a school during the day at this totally different environment.
Yeah, totally different environment. Totally different environment. And it's having its own issues that we have to deal with. Because a lot of the hostility that comes is because people don't have familiarity. And people react based on stereotypes. And that was the kind of thing that we were constantly confronting.
Mm-hmm. Had St. Ignatius ever had a black student club before?
No.
How did they react when you wanted to do this?
Well, actually, it's interesting. At first, there was interest because, Jesuits have a history of raising Cain within the church and fighting for and starting the Mexican Revolution of 1810. Hidalgo, I think he was a Jesuit that helped kick that off, and I know there were other Jesuits involved. So one of the things the school arranged, there was a panel. It would be 2 or 3 black guys and one white guy sometime, and we would go to other Catholic schools in the area and have discussions about race relations. So initially, you know, it was supported to a degree. And then
what are the years here?
this is
high school?
let's see. I was in Natchez from '65 until I got kicked out in March of '69. That would have been my senior year. But that's a good story. We'll come back to that. So this is taking place. So 65, 66 was my freshman year. So 66, 67 is when we started this organization thereabouts. And we would have meetings, we would have discussions, we would read books and what have you. And then, as was happening at that time, black student organizations in schools, high schools, and colleges had a list of demands. And we wanted black studies, black history at that time was Booker T. Washington, and slavery, and not even then Harriet Tubman so much, but it was that was it. So we wanted black studies, we wanted outreach to community, we wanted more minority students in the school. So we submitted our little list of demands, and they basically said, get out of here. So we organized a walkout. And this was a big thing at the school because this is a school where judges and folks sent their kids, so it was a big to-do. So we led this walkout, and the day of the walkout, there was press. My mother found out about this on the news that evening. Mm-hmm. I came home. Fortunately, my father worked the graveyard shift. He wasn't home. Otherwise, we might not be having this conversation now. So I came home, and my mother was sitting there with my brother and one of my brothers and my sister crying because she just seen this and she knew there'd be consequences because it costs more to go to this high school than to some of the local colleges, okay? And they had invested a lot. I was going to be the first one in my family to go to college. And I come in, right on. And my brother decided to fill in for my dad, and he burst into the room and he was going to kick my butt, and I started talking until he listened. I had done what my mother had taught me to do. And in time, she and my father both came to understand that. So the next day, went back to the school, and we were informed. My father took me to school, and we were informed that myself and Tyler we had been expelled from the school, and that was the end of my high school career. Now, I'm going to just here's the thing. It's an amazing story. We went on with our lives. We both became members of the Black Panther Party, and eventually, even after the party, he works for unions. I did a variety of things. 30 odd years later, we get contacted by one of our classmates, Greg Myers, and he said, "Mac, we're going to get the school to apologize and give you your high school diploma." And 39 years later, that's exactly what happened. He had put together this movement, reaching out to just about every black student who had ever gone to the school that was still alive. And the school apologized and gave us our high school diplomas.
Amazing.
Yeah. 30.
Yeah, cool.
What was really cute is that...
did you go back to get it?
Yeah, they flew us in.
Yeah.
They flew us in. They had a big event, over 200 people. They had it at the school. We got commendations from the mayor and 2 members of the U.S. Congress. But the thing that I find the cutest is one of Gary's granddaughters, had to be about 5 years old, said, "Granddaddy, how come it take you so long to get your diploma?"
And he had a good story to tell in response. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I wanted to ask about, because those times in Chicago, were you, I mean, you guys were in school, but were you aware of King coming to town and
Oh yeah, he was in
organizing?
my neighborhood.
Okay, yeah.
When he came, he stayed around the corner. In fact, my buddy Tyler, he got to see him. He got to see him because he was right across from Douglas Park. He was on Hamlin. He stayed on Hamlin, and right across from Douglas Park. And Gary was walking from the park towards his house, and Dr. King was talking out the window to some of his staff, and he looked up and said, "Good morning, Dr. King. Good morning, young man." It just yeah, yeah, yeah. And I remember I actually do a story about it. How King said, "I have dealt with racism throughout the South, and I ain't seen nothing like racism in Chicago." You know, there was a priest who taught racism from the pulpit over in Mayor Daley's neighborhood. I can't remember his name, but I have it somewhere. In fact, because I remember while we were in high school, one summer we had this job, and we were going to the we were in Bridgeport, knocking on doors trying to sell something. Somebody didn't like us. I don't. So we're doing this. We're getting doors slammed in our face and what have you. And then one of our white classmates. This is all through Ignatius. One of our white classmates. He says, "Come on." He drives up. Says, "Come on, come on, y'all get in the car," because he had overheard this group of white folks saying they're going to round us up and do us bodily harm. Yeah, that was our last day doing that job. Yeah, Chicago is still considered the most segregated city on planet Earth. Very much so.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember there being a change of any kind when King and those folks came in, or there being talk about it, or?
Oh, I remember. Yeah. There was I remember before the there was going to be a march. Before the march began, King was hit upside the head with a brick. Before the march began, and the level of violence, the level of animosity, he said I mean, and he'd been hosed down. He'd been dealing with the Klan in the South. He said, "I ain't seen nothing like this." Chicago.
So tell me about. So you got kicked out of high school. Mm-hmm. What next?
Well, then I became a full-time member of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party.
And when had you first come in contact with the Black Panther Party?
Well, like I said, I read. And so the party formed in October of 66, and it was, I think, around 67 that they went to the Sacramento Capitol to protest the law, 67, 68, to protest the law that they had been using to bear arms legally. And that was in the news. I mean, that was an amazing thing. The pictures of them standing on the Capitol steps with their weapons, and the fact that they were patrolling the police with their guns and with their law books. All right, so, and I read Ramparts. I read Ramparts magazine among everything else. In addition to Ebony and Jet, I read Ramparts and other magazines and newspapers that dealt with dealing with social injustice. So I had a great awareness of the existence of the Black Panther Party and what they were doing out there. And then when they came to Chicago in October, November of 1968, I got the word that there was an office, 2350 West Madison, right in the corner of Western and Madison. I beelined there for the political education classes to find out about the party. And a guy I knew, a friend of mine, I used to run track when I was in high school. And this guy, Billy Che Brooks, who was the Deputy Minister of Education, he ran track for Marshall. That's how I knew him. And when I arrived at the office, there he was. And so I became a part of the education cadre, which was quite apropos. We taught the political education classes. We read. We discussed. There was a reading list. Everybody had to read, but we had to read everything on the reading list. And we would have these discussions, and then we would lead these political education classes. We would sometimes give talks. There were times when Fred would send me in his place to a debate or to give a speech, which was more than a notion because Fred was a phenomenal speaker and leader. So those were some of the tasks that I became involved in when I was in the party.
And when you're talking about Fred, you're talking about
Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton, one of the most amazing, like I said, speakers, a motivator, a leader, and someone who taught me the true meaning of commitment. Totally committed to this. And I mean, Fred was, the thing that was so amazing about Fred was 21 years old when he was assassinated. But Fred was, as they say, an old soul. I mean, in high school, he had been organizing out in Maywood at the various high schools. The blacks couldn't swim at the pool. Fred said, okay, we got to do something about this. That's what he was about. He was about doing something about things. And he was also someone who was open to learning new things, taking new approaches. A friend of mine, when he came to join the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, there's the stereotype of the Black Panther Party as being an anti-white organization. No, we were anti-injustice. And one of the things that made the party dangerous was the idea that we saw beyond this concept of race, and race being a tool that was used to divide people who should be working together. So my friend came up to join the party, and it's like, so give me a gun, I want to kill some white people. And Fred said, no, brother, that's not how we do things, all right? Here's some literature, take a look at this, and if you're still interested, come back, which he did. But many people aren't aware of the fact that's Fred Hampton in the Illinois chapter that started the Rainbow Coalition. Oh, yeah, we had the Rainbow Coalition, the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots. Now, people don't know about this. The Young Lords had been a Puerto Rican street gang that became political. The Young Patriots were poor Appalachian white folks. And you can see in American Revolution 2, it's on YouTube, you can see the meeting where Bob Lee and Hank Gaddis, who were our field secretaries, had gone into this community, into the poor Appalachian white community, to talk to these people about why poor whites and poor blacks should be working together. And there was this meeting, and Bob Lee is talking, and at the end of the meeting, this Mike, I can't remember, Mike Gray was the director. He interviews this old guy and says, well, what do you think about what the Panthers said? And I paraphrase it like this. Well, if them Black Panthers going to support us, I guess we should support them Black Panthers. And a week later, Bob Lee was in the area by himself doing some organizing. And he was stopped and arrested by the police, put in the police car to be taken away. Young Patriots saw what happened. They saw what happened, and they put the word out. Before that police car could go, they came and surrounded it. Men, women, and children, white men, women, and children surrounded, and they made the police let Bob Lee go. Poor whites, black folks working together, that was a dangerous thing for the powers that be. And that outreach started. The Young Patriots, the Young Lords, there were other groups that became associated with it. They started organizing their own Breakfast with Children programs. They started having their own political education classes. They started talking about why we should not be fighting with each other, why we should be working together. Oh, that was a dynamic, and that was inspired by Fred.
And why was that threatening to the powers that be.
Divide and conquer is the oldest tool in the book. What do? Here you have people that should be working together, and enter COINTELPRO. All right, enter COINTELPRO. So what do? You have people drop misinformation. So and so. One of the other things that the Black Panther Party was doing was working with the street gangs and getting them to stop exploiting the community and to become political. At the time, the biggest gang in the country, not just Chicago, in the country, was the Black Pea Stone Nation, the Blackstone Rangers, later called the El Rukns. Yeah. And Fred and Bobby Rush had these meetings to try to get them to shift their focus and become political. Mm-hmm. The FBI, under the COINTELPRO program, all of this is when we didn't know at the time that William O'Neill, our head of security, was an FBI plant. But someone would call the Panthers or write a letter. Someone would call the Black Pea Stone Nation. Yo, so-and-so, they're trying to set you up to keep us from doing this, working together. And it almost worked. All right. It did not get to the point they would have liked it, but people got to see. We didn't know this thing was happening, but we knew something was going on. All right.
Were there other plants or suspicions that there were others? So did it kind of work in terms of creating paranoia?
Well, in a manner of speaking, you had to be, because once it was a given that we would be infiltrated. Mm-hmm. It was a given. But when you started seeing things happen, and then all of a sudden that you have these people who are prodding this, so a level of justified paranoia was indeed evident, and that did ultimately have an effect on the party, in fact, on the movement in general. I like to make reference to this book, The Burglary, about the peace activists who broke into the FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, March 8th, 1971, the night of the Ali Frazier fight. Because they broke in that night because they knew, whether they hoped that that would allow them ease in getting into the office because everybody would be watching the fight. And that indeed was the case. They are who discovered COINTELPRO in one of the files that they took. And then we found out all manner of stuff that was going on. I mean, oh my goodness. I can't remember her name. There was an actress here in LA who was a supporter of the party. She would do fundraisers and what have you. J. Edgar Hoover ordered the FBI office here in LA to neutralize her. They started a rumor. She was pregnant. She was married. They started a rumor that the baby wasn't her husband's. And the baby died. The woman committed suicide. The LA FBI office was commended for having successfully destroyed this woman's life. Okay. Oh, whew. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing. And again, we didn't know. Like I said, again, we knew, but we didn't know. But our approach was, we are going to keep doing positive stuff. We are going to keep serving the people and helping the people. Thus, the breakfast program, the free medical clinics, which J. Edgar Hoover said that the most dangerous thing we did was the Breakfast for Children program, because the government wasn't feeding any children at that particular point in time. Mm-hmm. In fact, the subsequent programs that came were essentially the government saying, okay, we can't have these Panthers showing us out. We're going to feed them.
Head Start.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So what other programs?
So, and it's very interesting. At the 40th anniversary of the Black Panther Party, I was in Oakland, and there was a report by people from other chapters. And it was very interesting because at the time, we were immersed in wherever we were. All right, there was the national stuff, there was the local stuff. You got the paper, you read about stuff going on, but unless you were at some other, visited some other place, you didn't know what was going on. So in Illinois, we had the